school in the late 60s and the early 70s. By the time I was an adult, we'd be living on the moon in aquatic shopping malls, and dinner would be in a green pill. And that was it. No hunger, it's all sorted. So I thought, brilliant, the world's great. After World War II, they promised us, that's it, we're done with war, the human race. I get out of school, or even before I left school, there's industrial unrest, there's more war than there has ever been.
Then that punk time,
that was
when the Tories were in, all that kind of late 70s, early 80s.
The honourable gentleman knows that I have the same contempt for his socialist policies as the people of East Europe who have experienced it have it for theirs.
Well, all through the
79
80s.
she got in, didn't she?
Yeah, and then all through the 80s, everything just got really shit.
They had this guy in Home Secretary called William Whitelaw. He believed in short, sharp shocks.
We believe in this nation, not nationalisation.
Kids were sent to youth detention centres for very, very minor crimes.
You know you're not going to get the job as the managing director of ICI when you leave school. You know you're on the shit heap. You knew that. I left school and walked straight to the dole office and signed on £12 a week. That was our dole check. Straight out of school the day I left, straight down to the dole office. That was what was expected of us, because we were working class and the steelworks is gone and the mines is gone, there's nothing. Sorry.
They knocked down my house. They knocked down a community that I lived in, the council did, Princess Street, which had 3 or 4 generations of my family living in it. They knocked down the whole street and built a car park. I couldn't understand that. I was very, very angry about that. I was angry that I couldn't get a job. They put me on a youth opportunity scheme. And what I was doing, I was in a tile warehouse and there was loads of boxes of bathroom tiles that had been tipped over. And it was just like piles and piles of tiles. And my job, my opportunity, was to count every one of those tiles and stack them up. And that was my youth opportunity. Obviously, I didn't last very long there.
Then you're going home and listening to the Clash singing.
Career opportunities are ones that never knocks. Every job they offer used to keep you at the dock. Career opportunities are ones that never
knock. I hate the army and I hate the RAF. And we were just thinking, yeah, what, do I really want to shovel shit till the day I die and just not have a life? No, I'm sure there's more to it out there. I'm sure there is. And guess what? In America, in France, in all developed Western countries, Australia, there was kids having the same idea. And suddenly this thing flowered. You know, the Saints in Australia didn't know what the Ramones were doing, but God damn it, they did the same music, and all this stuff just grew up independently and then together because people thought or believed there should be a bit more to life.
We just fed up with everything that was going on around us, and we just, wanted to be different, and that, I think, and that was it, like, just to change things, and before I ever got into the punk scene, it always used to be, I used to live in Upper Calais, and I used to be a motorbike rider, so we used to go down the students' union and that, just to get fights and that, just stupid things I used to do in my younger days. These days, I'm getting on, so just can't be bothered. It was just a sort of a fight against society type of thing,
76 generally accepted as the year punk rock started. Yeah, if you're in London and parts of Manchester. But in the suburbs, places like Swansea, it took a bit longer to filter out. We had this small regional town, which was just quiet, off the beaten track. You only could buy flares, and suddenly there's a bunch of people who want something different. Therefore, they've got to start it for themselves. You did have enclaves of people listening to punk rock. Myself, I was 13 in my bedroom listening to the Sex Pistols and Johnny Thunders and the Damned, not really knowing if there was anyone else out there listening to the same stuff. And then I remember the day, 1978, I walked down Brinnymore Road on a Sunday to go and buy bread with my parents, and I saw Lindsay and JJ.
Because I found that all the other bands were quite sort of middle class and straight, really. So we were a bit like, snarly at
Yeah.
We weren't very nice, actually.
Now, JJ was the singer of Next Step, probably the seminal Swansea punk band. Lindsay was the guitarist. They had black leather jackets on, orange and green hair sticking up, zips, chains, the full 1977 look. And it just blew me away. I can remember standing on the pavement, 13, 14, thinking, I've got to know those people. I want to know those people.
As far as Next Step's concerned, we had our own sound.
I love power chords still. I still love that. But then I like bits that wander off. I think it was hearing it was Patti Smith that changed me completely when I thought, oh, I love that voice, that rawness, and that's kind of
She was a huge influence.
Yeah. We were doing the really strong acid and hanging out in Sandy Lane a lot. You remember those days?
We just used to like dressing up. That's what it came from. We like music, we like dressing up.
Dancing.
And the politics come into it as well. The politics and the drugs come into it.
You watch BBC4 now, they've got this new sanitised version of the 60s that peace and love was just a fashion accessory and they had flowers in their hair. No, they really meant it. And they tried to sanitise the whole scene.
But we never got into any sort of nasty drugs.
No, it was always the acid
It was always
and weed,
kind
really.
of weed and acid, really, yeah.
Yeah, the speed, mind you.
Oh, yeah, speed. Oh, speed and cider. We forgot about that bit.
To understand the punk rock scene, the drug of choice was amphetamine sulfate, which is not like marijuana, which is, hey man, or LSD. Let's explore. It's a city drug. It's an urban drug. It's let's get out there. It's cheap, fast, clean. Let's get out there. Don't bore us. Let's get to the chorus. 2-minute song. If it's over 3 minutes, what, you're playing prog rock or something? I don't want to listen to that shit. I want stuff that's 2 to 3 minutes long, and it was all forged in amphetamines.
We did have some of it, but it wasn't all 1, 2, 3 as fast as you can, the first box. We also took the piss out of ourselves a bit as well. One song called Do the Next Steps. If you're feeling such a twat, then wear a funny hat, do the next step. It's sort of like a ploddy thing.
That was a gig, our first ever and only London gig, and it was we were going to play at North London Poly, which was quite radical at the time, quite a sort of radical polytechnic. Before they had, they changed it to university now. Graham Gromit, he'd hired a van.
I'd forgotten about him.
And it broke down halfway there, and that was it. We never did the gig. And Lindsay was so pissed off, he broke up all his cigarettes and threw them out the window. Got his lighter, broke his lighter and threw them out the window. You fucking bastard.
Everybody who lived on Brunswick Street and a few others were the uber punks, you can say. Because they were the only punks, really. They were the only punks. We were a mix of feminist women, gay men. Not everybody was full-on punk, but we were all kind of on the same same groove.
And Lindsay, the bassist from Next Step, he used to hang around with this guy called Ian Bone, who's a famous anarchist, dubbed the most dangerous man in the world by the Daily Mail. And they ran Ian, I think Lindsay helped as well, and maybe some of Next Step, that they ran an anarchist publication or like fanzine called The Alarm.
We did The Alarm. I remember doing that at Brunswick Street, printing it out.
Printing
it.
Alarm,
and then
collating, stapling.
On the Saturday afternoon, we'd be selling it.
Working down with a badge stall in the market for a bit.
Yeah, Ian had a badge stall.
There used to be a little market at the top of Wine Street.
Like an indoor market.
Like a tiny indoor market. We used to go and do it on a Saturday afternoon. We'd work in there on a Saturday, Friday or Saturday and whatever, and do badges all day.
And they were quite political, the badges, because it was all about exposing the council.
Yeah, it was all like alarm badges and things, wasn't it? Yeah. And we used to...
I remember the Guildhall, one of the Guildhall broken, hit by lightning.
Yeah.
And the alarm was like an investigative journalist fanzine, and actually brought down 2 council members. They went to prison because of alarm and because of their investigations.
There was a council meeting in the Guildhall, and there happened to be a flower bombing situation went on where they just chucked all these flower bombs.
Oh yeah, when we went flower bombing the Guildhall. Yeah, I was there for that.
Yeah.
Lindsay used to have this like alter ego as like this woman. So he's dressed up as Mrs. I can't remember her name. He was dressed up as Mrs. whoever he dressed up as, with makeup on. And he went in the council chambers and chucked eggs and flour at the council because he was so disgusted with the corruption.
So I remember the autonomes playing with us, and they used to hang out with us a bit, and we liked them.
We thought they were pretty cool. 14-year-olds being like proper full-on punks kind of thing, doing this stuff.
We were much younger, we couldn't even drink in pubs. We were 13, 14. So our path was the youth club, when you're just standing in the youth club and realising, oh, there's 4 or 5 guys who look the same as me. And then we started taking our punk records to youth club on the Friday night disco to see if they'd, just so we could have some of our music, because the rest of the night was ABBA and Shawadi Wadi and Mud. So we'd take up Slaughter and the Dogs, or we were always trying to push it, see how radical the music we could get. Or Iggy Pop and the Stooges, I remember one night, which didn't go down well with the ABBA fans.
In 1977, when I was 11, I moved up from Parkland School in the Eisteddfod on St. David's Day in 1977. So I was in the first year, I was 11. There were some students in the 4th year, a guy called Bruce Yo, Nick Boyle, who went on to be the drummer in a band called What to Wear. They had a band that they formed only for the Eisteddfod, and it was called Dr. Martin and the Half-Masters. And they did a cover version of I Want to Be Your Dog by Iggy Pop and the Stooges, on cross-legged on the floor, because I was a first year, I didn't get a chair, and these 4 blokes walked on stage with Woolworths guitars and played I Want to Be Your Dog. And I don't remember the name of the singer, but he had a green anorak on, the snorkel anorak, and he had it done up, so he only had the snorkel and he had the microphone in the snorkel. And the teachers were freaking out because they couldn't believe that this was happening, right? Like, and that was it. That was it. I was like, I went home and I was like, Mom, I want a guitar. I want to be in a punk band. I didn't even know what a punk band was.
I went to Oxford School, and when I was about 14, 15, they obviously heard of punk by now. The Stranglers had been, and the Sex Pistols had been on the telly. And so I got a little band together with my friends, and it wasn't looked on very nicely by the teachers.
When we went in with thin ties, and everyone, well, 5 or 6 of us had our hair cropped and then pierced our ears, we were called, and I can remember an art teacher taking us aside and saying, tell me what's going on. And I can remember we sat in a biology classroom and told the art teacher about punk rock, because he said, the headmaster and that's really see this as a threat, and they did.
One occasion in school where one of the head tutors, the form tutor, came in and he put a record player on stage, and of course he'd heard punk music and he wasn't very keen on it, and so he played the Sex Pistols, and then he played Dire Straits. And they said, okay, who in this school likes the Dire Straits song? And everyone put their hands up. And he said, who likes the Sex Pistols?
And Pete Jones, God bless him, stuck his hand up.
And it was just me. And it was, see me after the assembly. I was going, wow, okay.
And we were like, you fool, you're going to get detention or the cane or something.
There was a few concerts put on in the drama hall in Swansea School, and some little local bands got together, and a few little punk bands played in the drama hall in Swansea in in school.
One of our friends, his dad had captured a Hitler Youth flag at Arnhem in 1944, and we thought, we're 13, 14, let's put this up for a gig. And can you believe it, we played our school, All for School Drama Hall, with a giant, and I mean a giant, Nazi flag, with the words that we'd made in the art class, Autonomes über alles, Autonomes overall.
It was like a gathering of the youngsters and making their mark and standing up and saying, okay, our music scene counts, our punk rock is part of what we like, and we're going to do it now.
And they did. And then culminating in 79 when Alarm made their famous School Kids issue, and they sold it outside our school. And that made the Welsh national news and made the newspapers. You'd have kids mitching from, or playing truant, as they say in the rest of the country, from at least 7 or 8 different schools, ranging from private fee-paying schools to the roughest council estate schools. But we didn't care what financial backgrounds we had. If you were into punk rock, you were all right.
Well, there was one record store in Swansea which, especially amongst the punk scene and growing up, was well renowned. That was Virgin Records, which was on Union Street. It was kind of nice. A lot of the local faces worked in Virgin Records, and so all the punks and the mods and that would all mix in the same place, would all hang out there.
Virgin Records was such a small place. Had 2 windows, 1 door, and 1 door at the back that led into the market. And it had a small counter, all the records behind the counter. It had one listening booth at the back, and that was it. You know, you probably could have got, on a good day, you probably would have got like 50 people in there, and then it would be rammed.
I remember quite clearly when you went through that door, on the right-hand side, there was a poster board, sort of bulletin board, with all little flyers of gigs and that kind of thing. And I just remember looking at that going, wow, there is stuff going on. And then, you know, you'd go down the next day and you'd sort of just have a little look around, then you'd be there for half hour, then you'd be there for an hour. Whereas, you know, eventually then every Saturday, everybody just used to go into, you know, just congregate and have a conversation and talk about gigs that were coming up. So for me, Virgin was definitely the first place that gave me confidence to think, oh my God, I could be part of something.
There's a few people, like, especially around like Virgin Records and that, were kind of, they were the people to aspire to. I mean, like people from Next Step, you had JJ, Lindsay, this guy called Animal, I don't know his proper name. We used to call him Animal. I think his proper name is Chris. And they just looked so amazingly punk. And people that worked there, it was a girl called Wendy.
Wendy were kind of the alpha females, you know. She was that trendy Wendy from Virgin.
And an old guy, hippie guy, can't remember his name. Jeff was the guy, the old hippie kind of guy there. He used to put a damper on things. I remember Ivor, one of the punk guys, beat him up one day though. I remember also Ivor pissing on the window of Virgin Records. This was on a Saturday afternoon.
There's a punk round town there called Ivor.
I remember.
And he was like an old punk. So he had spiky yellow hair, do you remember, and bondage trousers, and he was one of them spit at you types.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like an old punk. And I said, can I have that music, please? And he went, well, at least she's got good taste in music.
Oh,
I remember that.
I bet you were chuffed.
I was chuffed.
Yeah. I thought you were absolutely chuffed.
Yes, I didn't have a row. But
acceptance.
We were
too young to be proper punks.
Yeah.
We were sort of very influenced.
I used to love it, and they used to have this metal strip that used to go right around the door, either side, for the alarm. And I used to go in with a little razor blade or something like that, and put slices in it. So when they close up, the alarm would go off, and they could never find out where it was, you know. I always used to do it, and they knew it was me, but they wouldn't do anything. It used to be, you know, it was just me, just being a bastard.
It was so parochial down here. And yeah, we had to get out of here because we were just getting beaten up every time we stepped outside the door. It got really heavy, didn't it?
In Virgin Records, on a Saturday in the 70s, pubs would shut at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. There was no all-day opening. So what the drunk football, well, they weren't even football hooligans, just horrible people. What would they do at 3 o'clock when they've got nothing to do? They'll come over Virgin Records and start pushing kids around, beating up the older punks. And on more than 2 occasions, I saw some quite horrific attacks on young guys just because they had leather jacket and coloured hair. And this was going on in Swansea for a couple of years, and there was nothing done about it. It was almost like you deserve it because of the way you look.
It was, if it wasn't us, it would have been black people or gay people.
Yeah, yeah.
It was
People just pick on
anyone who's different.
Somebody who's different, don't they? Somebody who looks
Yeah.
different, yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's much, much more acceptable now. It's extremely acceptable to just look as weird as you want to look, you know.
One thing always sticks in my mind is on Lindsay's jacket, he was one of the members of Next Step. It said, it had a weird face, and it said, "Think for yourself." And that's the one thing that encapsulates the whole punk rock DIY thing. Think for yourself. Don't be a drone. Think for yourself. If you have dreams, pursue them. Think for yourself. Don't be told by people that, yeah, you've got to work in a chip shop for the rest of your life, or you've got to work down the mines, or you've got to become a bus driver. Think for yourself. And it just encapsulates it for me.
But my punk stuff always came from feminism, always came from a political viewpoint. So your political statement or whatever way you looked and your music you loved, people were more aware of you, but then you were actually more visible, weren't you, for all the hatred that we had. And, you know, I remember coming home from a gig in town one day, me and my friend, where I lived in Plasmal, so we used to walk home, and a gang of boys came behind me and actually threw a big house brick at me. Just used to, you know, the abuse that we used to have wasn't just verbal, it was really, really bad, you know. You don't see that level of abuse and aggression from the public today, thank God. For me, being a girl in that movement was 100 times worse, because I remember lots of, you know, I used to dress exactly like the boys. So, you know, my hair was a big Mohican, I'd have jeans on, you know, T-shirts, and because I was tiny then actually as well, people used to assume I was a boy. And I remember one day somebody in the market shouted at me, a stallholder, and I turned around and she saw I was a girl. And her shock was even worse because I was a girl. It was almost accepted that boys, okay, we can sort of tolerate that. But when there were, you know, girls involved, the first thing I remember she said to me was, "How do you think you're going to get a husband looking like that?"
They couldn't understand why somebody would want to, like, dye their hair pink, put safety pins through their ears and noses, and wear ripped clothing with, like, "fuck off" or "fuck you" written over it. They couldn't understand the aggression. And I mean, that was partly, it was almost like a barometer for what was going on in Britain at the time. You know, this anger that people were expressing didn't come out of nowhere. It came out of the really oppressive political situation at the time. And you were on the streets, you didn't have any money, you just wanted to express that, and they couldn't understand the anger and the rage of punk rock.
You're not only learning about music and life, but you're learning about, you're developing your views as a person. You're learning at what's right and what's wrong, other than the right and wrong that your parents have told you.
You know, if you think about Swansea's a small town, it was even smaller in the 80s. So I stuck out, you know, like a sore thumb. We're in a very strange cultural environment in Swansea, because when I go to Cardiff, people actually come up to me and say, "Oh, you look fab." You know, my daughter lives in Bath. "Oh, you look fab, I wish I could look like you." Swansea, you don't get that. So I think Swansea has a very, very different view of anyone who looks different. And challenges the status quo in Swansea. It's just something I've always thought I've got to tolerate if this is my belief. And obviously my belief came from a political standpoint, and that hasn't really wavered in my viewpoints. I had to stick with it, where a lot of people I know couldn't tolerate that, because I said the abuse and the aggression was really bad. You know, wouldn't let us in pubs. you couldn't even go into some shops, you know, literally, I don't know what they thought we were going to do. And me on my own, going into, you know, British Home stores or something, I was often told to get out. So it was a really, really bad time in terms of that. But because you had such a really good friendship and a core of people who stuck together, that really gave you that sort of energy to carry on and, you know, carry on with your beliefs and what you really wanted to do. You used to go around houses, you used to go to the pub, you used to plot things and, you know, organise things every single day. Whereas now you'll have a one-off gig, you'll have a one-off event. You don't have that. We lived really as a family because a lot of our families disowned us, you know, mine did. As soon as I looked like I did or started getting worse as I got older, you know, I wasn't allowed near my house anymore, my family home, so I left home quite early. So a lot of us were in the same situation where we saw ourselves as our family, really. So.
And there was a very limited number of pubs, the Queen's in Oxford Street being one, the Queen's down by Circles Club being another. Very few pubs that would let punk rockers in.
There was a venue called the Top Rank in Swansea then, which held about 2,000 people, and big bands would tour around to Swansea. And I can remember the Stranglers playing there, and the Clash, and Ian Jury. I remember that specifically because he was phenomenal on stage. But you know, lots of heard of bands, and bands were sort of from the pop bands like the Radio Stars, who had sort of hits in the charts, to sort of pop bands that were regarded as proper punk bands. You know what I mean? Obviously, the Damned played Swansea a few times, which was the sort of, to me, they're one of the class punk bands over the years.
The sort of turning point was when we had a proper venue, which was Circles, Dora's. And then Ian Bones started putting on the Anarchy road shows on a Monday night. And that's when you could really go up, you'd get a half-hour, 40-minute set, whatever you wanted, and you'd have a proper PA and proper amplification.
It was the gold ticket. It was like playing at the Fillmore East, wasn't it? Playing at Pandora's, if you could get in. Because you had no chance of getting in sort of Top Rank or in places like that, I don't think. And so that was the holy grail. Normally we tried to write our own songs, and they were more blues-based than punk-based, I thought. But because the old guard then had all the good gigs sewn up, you tend to play with the Next Step or Venom or Autonomes, etc.
Dora's had fab gigs going on. You know, we had really sort of big, obviously, UK Subs, Southern Death Cult, before they became Death Cult, then The Cult. So really, really early bands used to play there. Used to go there Saturday nights, whenever there was a gig on. Because I was quite young, it tended to just be weekends, because I was obviously in school. Lots of women and girls used to go there, so that's where I think I felt the most comfortable, seeing other girls around me. So that was really good. But obviously, you know, really dirty, really scruffy, really scummy, and it was just horrible. But they'd let you in, and, you know, you could just lounge about and do what you wanted, take your own drink in. They never used to search you. And one thing I remember about Dora's, which is really odd, is the girls' toilets, because we used to have a big blackboard on one of the walls. So everybody used to, like, draw pictures and, like, write band names on it and messages on the board. But yeah, I loved Dora's. Really, really loved Dora's.
I first went to Dora's when I was 14, and I told my parents I was staying at Jane's. Jane said she was staying at mine, that sort of thing. We went with Jane's older sister and her boyfriend, and they plonked us on the stage, gave us a joint, and we smoked a joint between us. Stoned off our faces at Dora's. Yeah. I think so. And then the next day, we got caught. We got found out.
I went there for a fancy dress once, and this is how strange it was. I had a customer who had various weird fads. One time he was into gangsters, then he was into American Indians, and he always bought the full kit that went with this. And then he got interested in German militaria. He wasn't a Nazi or anything like that, but he just used to come to my shop and buy any books on the SS and tanks and all that. And he had a full SS uniform, and he lent me to go to this fancy dress-in. So I went to a fancy dress-in. You wouldn't consider doing that now, but then it was, political correctness hadn't really sort of raised its head above the parapet.
There was a gig in Dora's I always remember, where they sang Wild Thing, and I come on with a wig and an armour. And Caroline, who's dead now, she would come on and she would just rip the wig off me like that, and I'd be chasing her around the stage. It was just right fucking crazy, like right mad, like it's just stupid things.
I remember the first gig I played indoors was with The Noise, supporting Next Step. A fantastic night, you know. I can remember playing there and we got £7 to share as a band. Apparently there was a lot of overheads that night. But, you know, you're 14 years of age and you're playing in a nightclub, you don't really care. You can imagine going to school the next day and asking guys what you did last night. Oh, I played football. Oh, I played with my Action Man. Oh, I went and played in a nightclub with transsexuals and drug takers and crazy people.
Because we didn't have the social media, we had to get out there and do it, really.
Yeah.
We all kind of just met in Swansea at gigs.
I know how I met you.
Do you? I can't remember.
No, I can't remember actually meeting you.
Tenby was a big one. But, you know, I could go in there on my own knowing that there'd be at least 20, 30 people I could just sit down and have a conversation with. You know, I wouldn't be able to do that now.
Student union bar used to be great, as long as you weren't a student.
But you're students.
I was on the door of the, what do you call it, the student union bar, and if I didn't like them, they wouldn't get in. Right bastard it was. It was mad.
I went one day and there was 18 bands on the bill and not one of them turned up. That was quite interesting. There was a famous band who only played a couple of shows called Band 2, who smashed every single window in the students' bar, and there was about 30 windows.
You've only got to realise a lot of people, when we were playing, there's only places they could get in.
Well, I first came to the Coach in about 1978 when local bands, local punk bands first started playing in Swansea. This place has a history going way back, certainly to the 60s. I saw a lot of the offshoots of Man, like the Trembling Knees, bands like that playing here. And even right up until the 90s when heavy metal became popular, this was still a thriving live venue. You used to go downstairs into what was known as the Dungeon, and it was actually painted like a dungeon. There was brick walls, there was pictures of Vikings kind of torturing people on the walls and that. And if you had a good night in there, you know, you'd have 200 people jammed in there. Again, a sweaty club. I can remember going on a school trip once to Barry Island, and because I lived in the centre of town, the teacher said, "Where do you want to be dropped?" And I said, "Outside the Coach and Horses." And I got off the bus, I took my tie off and walked in to the obvious displeasure of my teachers, to a big hello from everyone inside, and proceeded to purchase a pint. And if the barman wasn't behind the bar, it was okay to go and pour your own and leave the money on the counter.
And I worked there myself then towards the end for 10 years. I was supposed to be the manager, but how many times I got sacked? About 3 or 4 times for fiddling and that, but still took me back because I was a good worker.
Barron's quite funny because Barron's is what is known in the non-politically correct days as Grab a Granny Night. So this is what I think the only nightclub in Swansea where you had to be over 25 to go in, and so you get the older clientele. That was up until probably the late 80s. Then it became a bit more of a dance music venue, and actually towards the end of its life it became quite a good club, and there'd be some good nights here.
Then, because Barons were sort of middle-aged people,
And my mum.
they started, because we were like 17, 16, 17, and we were wearing this stuff, dancing on the stage and gyrating. Of course, these older, they were complaining. So one day, we eventually went there, and I'd already met you, wouldn't I? I was with Kim Harrigan.
Yeah.
And she had a big purple week, and Kim at the time. And we went there, and he said, "I'm really sorry, we can't let you in." And we said, "Why?" And he said, "We've had complaints." I said, "About what?" He said, "You're not being decently dressed." He said, "Open your coat." I said, "Well, there's no need, really." He said, "Open your coat," and I went like that, and I had a black petticoat on, nothing knickers, and fishnets over. He went, "I'm really sorry, we can't let you in anymore." I said, "That's fine." I couldn't be a goth off the peg. This is why it was important to you had to be creative about it.
And all of that era, that really outrageous makeup. You know, I mean, you look at some of the makeup in some of those photographs.
I know, it's
You're
brilliant.
just walking up High Street to go to a nightclub with this makeup on. It's amazing.
But it was dressing up. It was
well.
the whole thing, wasn't it? So dressing up.
But I always got ready elsewhere.
Yeah. There was one shop up there called 31B, but I think that closed then. I remember
it was quite expensive.
Yeah, it was. But I remember buying must have been about 14. I was young, and I bought my blue bondage trousers there and red bondage trousers there, and I had Dr. Martens, and I spiked my hair up, and I wore a stripy jumper because I seen Ivor wearing one, and I found it in a second-hand shop. I was like, here I am, this is me.
It's because there was an alternative night in Barron's. They stopped the alternative night, and everybody, you know, loads of people with inappropriate anoraks on in the summer and massive hair, and boys with makeup on. We're like, where are we going to go? Because you're going to get a kick in if you go anywhere else. Yeah. And so it was, I've heard of this place where the gays go to dance.
Yeah. It was crazy because we worked there, we get paid like on a Saturday. By the Wednesday, we'd go in to ask him for a bottle. We had money on us, but we had to go in to ask him for a bottle because otherwise he'd know we'd been fiddling. So, you know, just robbing off everybody, you know, in a way, so just to make a living. Over the years and that, the amount of people that I know that were gay, you know, and they were punks and that, surprised, you know, like, you know, I've just thought, God, I didn't know he was gay, like that, or bi or whatever, you know. And there's so many around. And I think the punk scene sort of brought that out as well with a lot of things, you know, helped away, you know, a lot of people to express the way they felt and everything.
I went with another friend, Terry Coombs, who sadly isn't with us anymore, but we both sort of came out as gay to each other and then decided that we needed to go and explore. So that was quite a big thing, but also the fact that we looked so different to everybody else that we couldn't get in anywhere else. So the Palace would take all the waifs and strays and give us a sort of home for the weekend.
And you had to knock on the door.
And there was a little shutter and it said on the top, bona fide guests only. And you'd knock on the door and a little shutter would open. And
we had to be careful. I mean, you know, we had bouncers on the door, and I'd have 800 in on a Saturday, maybe, you know. I thought, it was bouncing. When we bought it, it wasn't open much in the week, but we started opening it like Mondays, Wednesdays, and then the university people used to come. They used to have a night sometimes, you know.
I used to go to Jingles with the women's group, some people from the women's group and the LGBT group from the university. And that would have been early 90s, 1990, 1992, something like that. Jingles was a great night. It was just really welcoming. So some of my straight friends would go down as well, just because it was a really welcoming night. Always good fun.
We were kind of the part of the young crowd.
It probably got on everybody else's nerves. We were so legless drunk and not wearing very many clothes.
It was just a wonderful family, and everybody trusted each other, and we'd all get so drunk. I mean, so drunk.
And look out for each other.
And
make sure we were safe.
And it was quite like an erotic sort of friendships we all had, didn't we? Everybody was sort of speaking with everybody else, snogging everybody else. There was I don't know how many people I had my tongue in their mouth.
No.
Male or female, it didn't matter in the end.
Those times I went there, Julie and I ended up snogging. Because she thought I was a girl.
Well, there you go.
And it was always a smell of poppers in the air.
God,
Always a smell of poppers. And there were lots of more men than women.
Definitely.
More men than women. Not all goths. We were at the beginning when I was going, it was a small percentage of us weirdos.
Selling cockles.
Yes.
The fishman. He come in, see all these outrageous kids in these ridiculous clothes. Crab sticks.
Oh, I love a bag of
Yeah. We all probably stank of vinegar. Spilt down ourselves.
Like young.
The police used to come in quite a lot, and we'd all hide in the ladies. Or you'd grab somebody and wrap them up.
Yes.
84, 85, when the Sun started running really nasty stories. And when I say nasty stories, it was like one of them saying an expert has said that it's time to stop messing about and gay men should be rounded up and put into concentration camps to stop the spread of AIDS. That was the level of the hatred that was being propagated and was absolutely publicly accepted. I think in 86, 87, over 80% of the population was in favour of locking up gay men. And I went up to Pride in 85 with the miners in the buses that they took up, the coaches they took up. There was no club or any commercial enterprise in South Wales took anyone to Pride. And if you mentioned it, people would be really hostile, and it's kind of, why are you waving this in people's faces? So we were, the older generation here, a lot of them were very, very closeted, which is probably another reason why a lot of them must have hated us.
Yeah, like a bunch of brightly coloured butterflies flying around, waving.
Yeah, and attracting attention.
Yeah,
it was attracting attention.
In those days, I wasn't out. So, you wouldn't be sort of covered in tattoos and that. You just think, I'm not going to tell people I'm fucking gay, make out as if I'm quite tough and that, to show, you're not scared of them and that. But now I don't give a shit, these days, there's so many people around and it's just accepted, so that's it, so.
There was somewhere to go where there was just never any trouble. There was trouble coming out sometimes. I know a couple of my friends had quite a lot of homophobia once they were on the outside of the building, but actually in there it was lovely. It was really good fun.
Well, I think the boys were all quite reliant on the girls as protection.
You were really, because
it was dangerous.
Yeah, it's dangerous.
And there was times when you'd be in the middle of the club, and they'd say, "Oh, there's people outside. Nobody must leave the club because there's people outside who are going to."
And I remember loads of times coming out, and only the girls, let the girls out. They wanted to beat the boys up, so they'd have to wait until they got bored and go, and then we'd have to wait for you lot to come out.
The police were very happy, and the council, that we had the club there. It wasn't in the town, in the city.
I can remember that obviously being a gay nightclub, it did attract a lot of attention, and I can remember a time when certain right-wing short-haired gentlemen had an idea that they were going to go up and do something about this club, but all the bouncers in Jingled happened to be gay and extremely hard, and when the skinheads came up, the bouncers saw them off, and to the delight of the crowd, and said, "Don't come back here again."
So that was like the first alternative night in Swansea ever had. Jingles was the gay club, but this was playing
Bauhaus,
the Doors and Bauhaus and the Carlton 60 stuff and new stuff, and they'd have a band there. So the Cavalier was alternative night there.
It's really amazing how much things have changed since then. But what it did, I think the really positive thing that Jingles had was it brought us together, and it strengthened our community. Certainly the scene that we had, and something that it got from punk, was that whole DIY.
That was the difference. It wasn't the X Factor generation, it was very much the do-it-yourself generation.
I used to find pieces in Oxfam, God, making myself sound old now, CNA, anything that was mainstream, I could make look different. So I could dye it, including my hair. I could, make normal jewellery look goth. I used to go to my grand's house and steal all her crucifixes and put them on a chain and be like, yeah, I bought it like this. Didn't. I remember I used to buy old lady nighties that were black and pink, and then I used to get a bra and then put the nighties over the top and then rip them, and then get my mum's fishnets, put them over my head through the crotch, and put my arms down the sleeves and rip them and wear the feet like gloves, right? Because you couldn't go to a shop and buy goth gloves, you had to make them. I naturally leant towards the alternative because I felt different. So when I realised there was a whole scene of people who, not necessarily because of race or class or the way they looked, felt different for whatever reason, I thought, oh, these are my people. My sister had friends who were goths, who used to go to the Shoulder Mutton, which was like a couple of doors that way. And I know that she said to me one night, oh, you know, we go to Shoulder Mutton and then we go to the Kings, which used to be down there, I think still is. And then everybody goes to the Zone. And I was like, what's the Zone? And she was like, oh, it's up the road. And it was a goth night. And in those days I was like, oh, okay, sounds good. And that was it then, never went back. Loved it, absolutely loved it. Went there right up until it closed. Right. But we loved that aesthetic of the sort of leather trench coats, the PVC latex, the black gloves, all that jazz. And when you think of that aesthetic, it came from The Crow, it came from Preacher. The way I was dressed, I was fully aware that I looked different, and that I was really overtly sexual on occasion in the way I dressed, and I did not feel safe walking around Swansea at all. Like, that would be a lie to say, like, oh, people were really friendly, because they really weren't. And it wasn't until you got in the club that you thought, oh, do you know what? I'm good now. Because they were a big group of lads that if anything kicked off, I knew I was completely safe.
DJing was very good. It wouldn't just be the latest rave stuff. They put Led Zeppelin on, you get The Clash, and then you get chart stuff, good chart stuff, and then banging dance music, Latino music, reggae, and a complete cross-section of people from 16 to 60, all dancing. It was a really fantastic venue, and for about 3 or 4 years, it was probably the best dance venue in Swansea. This was at the time before people realised dance music was a big money spinner. Then more tailor-made clubs that opened in Swansea and the other side of Swansea. But this seemed to have the original ethos of the dance music culture, which was very similar to punk rock at the end of the day.
I used to live in Cheltenham, and I came from Cheltenham to Saundersfoot on holiday, came back, and next door neighbours said they're going to see a band called Johnny Thunders and the Heartbreakers. So me and my brother said, yeah, we'll go as well. This was 1977. Went down there, saw a punk band, and it was just like, oh my God, this is it, man. I was 13. My hair was pink the next day. I was like, getting old women throwing things at me, people attacking you in the street, shame on you and all this. Yeah, so I loved punk. It was great. It's funny, but the punk scene, when it started, it had exactly the same feeling as the dance scene, you know? I'd definitely say the punk scene and the dance scene had anarchic qualities. Basically, the people were in control, not some big money man sitting there in his office and his big silk bloody tie and, you know, working out your life for you. It was a do-it-yourself scene, and that was the same as dance music.
I think what was great when all the rave type club nights took off was that they were really welcoming, and everyone, it was such a different atmosphere, because before that there were just the mainstream clubs, and you got indie nights or you'd got kind of funk nights, and each night was labelled with a different kind of music type, but it was very segregated, different types of people going to them on different nights. I think what the rave scene did was just welcome everyone.
A huge underground scene started because of Loma's putting an event on called Pulse.
We performed one of the Pulse nights that was one of the first kind of rave nights that was down at the university in 1991.
Acid rockers in the house! Come on, just stop all about!
And my friend said, have you ever been to a rave? I was like, no, I don't, it's not my thing. So it was at the refectory in Swansea University called Pulse, which is TikTok, it's Loma's event. And I didn't know what to expect. So we walked the ram, I mean, it was packed right through the corridors, and all these people who probably weren't drinking alcohol at the time. I'd never seen that before, and everyone was having so much fun. And I remember pushing through the crowd, getting a bit stressed out, and there's obviously merchants' doors alongside the refectory. And I'll never forget it. We were walking past, and someone had pushed the doors open. What was muffled beats came blasting through. I looked in, and all I could see, it was only a snapshot, the doors closed again, was thousands of people all going, ah, lasers coming this way, sound hit me, and I got goosebumps now talking about it. I went, oh my God, that's it. What is this?
Seeing just so many people enjoying themselves and dancing, and it's perfect. Again, as a dancer, if you want to interact with people, it's a perfect crowd. It's not like I'm just on a stage looking pretty doing some amazing footwork. It's actually kind of being with people and getting them involved, maybe teaching them a bit of acrobatics, maybe, you know. It was great.
Can you imagine now people go once every 2 or 3 months or something like that? This is every week you'd be looking at flyers trying to find somewhere to go.
That was when there were like dozens of independent clubs in Swansea. You know, you could go up to a venue, find the owner, say, we want to do a night, we've got a crowd. He goes, great, you take the door, he runs the bar. Happy days, you know. And you had Escape, which was always a kind of authentic dance club.
We played house music, which was a lot more melodic, a lot slower.
Jubilee's a couple of doors down, it was kind of another little independent place. Martha's, which is like utterly gone now. Quids Inn, it was renamed as Quids Inn.
Martha's and TikTok was every single Friday, queues around the buildings.
TikTok was a hard house night, well, a happy hardcore night.
And it's all for the same reason. It's for the excitement of getting in your house, getting ready, jumping in the car, standing in the queue, talking to everybody else all around you. Hundreds and hundreds of people. Down this neck of the woods or the south, it was more hardcore raves like slamming vinyl, dreamscape, that kind of thing. So there was still plenty, and they were all going there for the same reason. It's a rave. They might differ music, but the vibe in all of them was exactly the same.
This one's going out to Eloise and myself. It's going out to Naomi. Second, now watch it. Hey, another resident DJ Juice. DJ Juice! Yes. Ah! Top geezer.
I built up a following in Martha's, having gone there as a clubber and then progressed onto being resident DJ there. Built up a good following down there. So once Steve Lomas, who pioneered TikTok, sort of lost interest in doing events after so many years, it was quite easy to keep the crowd. There was no gap. It was only like a few weeks gap between that finishing and me starting this. At the same time as I started Breathe, which was only to play and have fun and have people in my area be able to enjoy the music, just took off.
Easily 500 people in here some nights, condensation running down the walls, no let up in the music.
Everything was black, walls black, floor, your feet would stick to the floor, but it was great fun. And we'd heard rumblings that there was an event on in the Palace, which I'd never even heard it. It was only 150 yards away. And we went up and it was a garage night.
I was doing Escape. The Palace started while Escape was going, and started by a disgruntled ex-employee of Escape. And from that point, there was pretty much a bit of a standoff, really. So we played different music to them. They played garage, and we played house. And that little division was enough to mean that we didn't tread on each other's toes.
I couldn't believe it. You walk through the doors just into the downstairs thing, and there's something about it, because it's such an old sort of ornate building with all its original features, and they'd really kitted it out well, and it was packed. And the next day I went up to meet the owners and said, look, can we come here instead? And that was the start of Breathe going into the Palace, which changed everything for Swansea's dance scene and changed my life. So it was brilliant.
The Palace hadn't been used for a while, and it was lovely. It had been resurrected because it had been empty for a bit. Can't remember who it was we knew at the Palace, but anyway, we started a night there, and we got 800, 900 people turning up on a good one every 2 weeks on a Friday. Started off, it was Latin, jazz, funk, bit of disco, reggae, and then Big Beat happened. Really, Fatboy Slim came out, and then everybody just wanted that fatter sound, so we'd play the sort of funkier, mashed up, louder stuff, I guess. Weekends Ahead of You, You're getting paid, you're going out, and you're in the Palace. I mean, it couldn't have been a better venue for it, really.
The first event we did had 550, which was rammed, and they were queuing round the two sides of the building. So you turn up in your car after decorating it all day, nervous as hell, and then going, oh my God, 5 thick all around 2 buildings. I swaggered into the club that day, let me tell you. So you had 2 things that hit you with the Palace. One, the first room, which isn't as, you know, it's still got large pillars and lovely features. But then as you run up the stairs, these beautiful staircase that winds up to the main arena, as it's designed, so as you walk up the top, you're gradually getting to see and hear everything. So, and the stages in front, we would pay hundreds of pounds, £300-400 just for lasers. Made sure they were positioned right in front of the doors and above the DJ. So the first thing you hit was first the heat, the sound, the silhouette of everyone dancing, and these lasers hammering out across the whole thing.
I mean, the hilarious thing was they'd spent thousands, tens of thousands on the lights, you know, when we got there they gave us this amazing, you can do this, and there's lasers and all the rest of it. And we only had one light on, and that was an original 60s oil projector. You know, you get all the psychedelic metal and oil. And we'd mount that on the circle, which you couldn't get into ordinarily. You'd get up there, and there's these tiny little penny seats, they were called, little thin bars. And we'd put the oil projector up there, and it was just huge. And that was our only light, was this enormous oil projection. I had to go up to the 3rd floor, and the whole balcony would, you know, if it was really loud, would sort of bounce slightly to the beat, and you could just sit there with your eyes shut, your head back, and just go boom, boom, boom.
I moved to the flats opposite, and it became like a drum and bass type of place where it was just thump, thump, thump all the time. And, you know, I had to call the environmental health out in a evening post, you know, to try and, you know, get something sorted, but it just kept on and on.
In the back wedge, there's a backstage staircase, and because I was performing on the stage for the Palace, we were invited to use the backstage dressing rooms. It was absolutely beautiful. There's a tiny little wooden stair. It was like a tiny little rabbit warren, kind of miniature rabbit warren, with these little wooden staircases that led from the basement right up to the top of the building. And there's tiny wooden cubicles for each performer to change in. Absolutely beautiful. You could see that, although I was there on a club night, you could see what an amazing performance theatre it could have been once in its heyday, and just having the opportunity to be in that little wooden staircase running up and down it.
A girl came in with a boyfriend and asked if she could dance on stage. So she looked the part, she looked fantastic. So I said, yeah, go and dance. And there was maybe 5 or 6 of us that would be close friends, and Holly was one of them. But she also wanted a DJ, so she could DJ. I mean, she learned to taught herself, so I just taught, you know, fine-tuned it a bit. Sometime later, we realised that we were closer than just friends, and we've been together for 13 years, like that, and got married 5 years ago.
Are you ready? DJs, are you ready? Let's get ready to
People met at the Palace or met at Bar 5 or, you know, are married now because they met at a rave that we did. People now are still talking about, oh, it's not like that it wasn't a Palace, you know, or Bar 5 was another one. Because it's once you experience it, you want to do it again, and if you've never experienced it, you don't know what you're missing.
A lot of the mainstream nightclubs were along the Kingsway then.
The Kingsway was the lifeblood of Swansea's night scene, you know.
You must have been abandoned, cause when we got to the Duke, I thought that I was going to, but I said, look out, can't waste good beer, gotta pull myself together, we've almost done the high street run, gotta pull myself together.
I remember going to the top rank when it first opened,
And I went in the top rank. It felt as if I up to my ankles in carpet because it was pure luxury, you know, because nobody'd seen this. That you going into, God, this is like a nightclub that you saw on television, you saw in a film, you didn't see it in Swansea, and that transformed. That would have 2,000 people there on a Friday night, a Saturday night. It would be bouncing.
Yeah, Kingsway, of course, you had Oceana, the largest club in Europe, or some such, you know, which is great because it kept them all the shirts out of the clubs for everybody else to enjoy. So all the other independent nights got everybody who didn't sort of identify with that main Ritzy's crowd, I guess. Space Base, where Sin City is, top floor, that was a different venue to the big one underneath it where Sin City is now. So they were separate. I saw like Mr. Scruff and the Herbaliser.
Everyone was into their glamorous cars, and you know, everyone had GTIs and BMWs, and you know, everyone was souped up vehicles and pulling up outside the club, boom, 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 and that was all part of it.
And showing off their cars going up and down the Kingsway. Everybody complained, this is ridiculous, somebody's going to get killed.
But then as pubs got later licences, and the recession kicked in about 96, 97, that had a massive impact. If you think with a recession, the poorest people it's going to hit are the youngest who are on the least income. Well, that's exactly who goes to raves and clubs, are the youngest people with the least disposable income. And that 3 or 4 year recession, by the time that had finished, it was enough to sever the connection between going out every week, and that's what you do and is expected of you, to going out once a quarter and picking an international event or a big festival to go to, rather than feeding the clubs on a regular basis, and it didn't recover from there.
The police decided that they wanted to get all the entertainment off the Kingsway and stick it down there in Wine Street so they could look after it in one place.
That concept of shoving everything on one road was because the police wanted it that way, because it's easy to police. Everything else just died.
Graphically, they could control Wine Street. They could park police cars at one end, park police cars at the other end. If there's any trouble, they could be there within minutes. By doing that, they pretty much stamped a death's head on the scene on the Kingsway. And it got rid of all the nightclubs on the Kingsway eventually, and all the bars closed, and everything disappeared.
I feel like Swansea's been swallowed up by Wine Street. I feel like Swansea's been completely sucked into a commercial, heavy drinking, rather tacky, formulaic. This is what you do on a Saturday night to have fun.
You're walking around those pubs/clubs. It's nothing like, it's just people just hanging on to alcoholism, waiting to pass out and get a taxi home. It's just sad. It's nothing like going out clubbing. That's going out drinking, ending up in a club.
The nightclub scene is pretty desperate around the country now, because I don't think there's been anything new for years and years.
No.
So until there's and usually what happens with clubs is it starts outside of clubs. So you've got rave, punk. Well, punk kind of started in the gay clubs in London, really, and it's a while before the Barons and those type of places take it on, and and I don't think it's kind of the young people I know will listen to music that.
And I think where it went off the boil a bit was that it suddenly, as with everything else, society it absorbs it and sells it back to you. And then suddenly, hey, you've got zippy tartan trousers in Top Man. And, you know, you can get a Ramones T-shirt now. You know, how many people who wear the Ramones or the Motorhead T-shirt have ever heard them?
We're only a city of 300,000 people, and we've got a big place out of town in Forestfach, a big ever-growing place in Morva. It's almost a unforeseen consequence of a brilliant regeneration of industrial wasteland. When you look at the Swansea Valley prior to 1960s, it's amazing what they've done there. But actually the knock-on effect has been on the town centre. And the palace, what's happening in the palace at the moment is a real shame. And whether it could be refurbished or not, I'm not an architect, I don't know. But to think that there isn't the call for it is, I think, very short-sighted. I knew a bit of the history of the palace, but only from my experience in the Troublemakers Festival when I was part of the levitation of the palace, because I just thought that's such a weird and wonderful idea that I had to be a part of it.
And envision the building rising up to the heavens. Imagine it rising up to the heavens. Rise up, rise up.
I understand it's privately owned, but it's also a part of our community. It's community owned. It's a part of our city. At what point is it okay for a commercial business owner to hold city heritage to ransom? At what time is that okay? If we were talking about a warehouse in Llansamlet on the Enterprise Park that's standing empty, then I probably wouldn't feel so strongly about it. But we're not. We're talking about one of the few old buildings that we have in an area of Swansea that has seen so many dramatic changes over the last century. And I think, yeah, if it's listed and it's got that heritage and history, then people do have a responsibility. And I also think council and Welsh Government have a responsibility to sort that out. And I don't see it, as I say, a compulsory purchase, particularly if the owners are saying, no, I can't afford to do it. Then go, OK, then we can. Thank you very much. We'll take this on and we'll run it as a not-for-profit. No one's gaining out of it, apart from the people of Swansea that live all around the building, that at the moment is so unsafe that they have to put railings around it.
When you rip all that out and just replace it with new, it's not a given that you're going to be able to do the same thing again. You know? It's not. That's why old places have always got that feeling, you know. You can go, yeah, you can sense the nostalgia and the history of a place, but you know, there's a physical aesthetic response from all of that. It changes the way you feel about something completely, you know, just from the way it is. You know, when something's sterile and new and conceived, then it's not a given that, you know, it'll have the same effect, and so you're left feeling slightly sterile.
I first went into politics when a man by the name of Maurice Howell, who was the Director of Planning in Swansea, borrowed a Land Rover to drive out to the south of France, and he went to Port Grimaud. And he came back and he said, I'm going to change Swansea's docks into a maritime porter. And everybody thought this man's mad. We will get potters, or we get artists, and it'll become a craft area. We'll have yachts there. People will work and live around the maritime quarter. Swansea led the way. They came down from Liverpool, from the Albert Dock, to see what Swansea was doing, of using old docks to transform it into a maritime city. Swansea Council went for the first Act of Parliament to put a barrage across the River Tower. Now, most people who were born perhaps in the last, from 30 years on, do not remember the River Tower empty of water, where there was just mud and supermarket trolleys stuck in the mud down below, because it's always full of water because of the barrage. That took an Act of Parliament. We must make Swansea a smart city as well, as good as any other city in the world, and I think that's the future. We're going to build a new arena in Swansea. That new arena will be a digital arena, thousands of people watching a performance that's going on live in Dallas, but in Swansea, or vice versa. We got a company coming from New Zealand called Skyline. They're going to build a restaurant on the top of Town Hill. There'll be cable cars taking people up. There will be 2 luge runs coming down, a zip line coming down. They've opened one in South Korea. They said that 600,000 people would visit it in the first year. Well, they were wrong. First 10 months, 1.2 million people visited it. These are the same company. We got those coming to Swansea.
Swansea's got great stuff going on at a community level, and the council works really well at a community level in the outer skirts. So we've got some really good community hubs, we've got really interesting little things going on, but all of the money, when it comes to bringing things together or looking at our city centre, goes to big business, rather than the community that is part funded already. It's almost there, but it's not there enough to be able to actually, as you get any connection and make a big change. Swansea's got so much creative arts in it, and at the moment there's no outlets for them whatsoever. You know, there's plenty of experimental things. We've got a circus in Swansea. We haven't got anywhere for circus performers to come and perform. It's not like we haven't got the talent to fill it, but we haven't got the space to put it on.
It's something where they put on bands as well as music, as well as dance. You know, let the whole thing build itself up. And I think it would be more self-perpetuating. We really need for a lot of people to step up and join hands and say, we need some kind of art centre, and maybe try and join the funding, petition the government to try and do some stuff like that.
The High Street would be perfect as an arts quarter. Make it into an arts quarter. Put the money into it as an arts quarter.
we kind of grew out of a previous gallery called Exposure Gallery, and that grew from a previous organisation called Swansea Guild of Artists, and that was like an arts group which kind of hopped around from empty building to empty building, doing community arts projects. So that was from the early 2000s, and then Exposure Gallery opened in 2003 on College Street. So it was always around the High Street area, and then back then there was like 1 or 2 shops open, the pub, some off licenses, a chip shop, and that was it. But yeah, so the street then was absolutely terrible. So 2006, 2007, I think it was named Britain's worst high street. And it kind of changed for us, because before, when we were on College Street, we had lots of people coming through the door. Lots of people from town would just pop in, passing trade. And as soon as we went onto the high street and become a Lyceum Gallery, all that stopped. No one came in. You know, even today, even though we have now got a base for the gallery, you know, 50% of what we do still happens outside of the gallery. We still do projects, exhibitions, or whatever in off-site things. When they turned the Christmas lights on in the city centre, 1 light bulb made it onto the high street. So there's one, opposite Argos, just one, which managed to make its way off a tree or something, dangling there. So there was this kind of abandonment, definitely, for the high street. I was aware of it as sort of a newcomer coming in, but in 2002, whatever it was.
Yeah, it's good, great. I mean, what they do on the high street's really good. It just needs to go that little bit further, doesn't it, up to the Palace. The likes of Volcano, they have creative input to direct where it goes. That's what they've done. Councillors are not supposed to be making decisions about stuff like that. They need other people who know what they're talking about to do that and to allow it to grow. You go to Bristol, all that stuff happens because the council let it happen.
No, it was good having a bookshop, and it was always lively, but it was almost lively whenever it didn't have a council tag on it. It was the stuff that happened from the passion of the people doing it, rather than the stuff that came from an official sort of source. And I'm being a bit cynical, but that seemed to be the way it was. And even now, I think that's the way.
And the high street's still, the high street's got some amount of social problems still. And it is an area of high deprivation. And there are people who are facing need more than just a hostel bed for the night. There's people on the high street that need some significant social support, and we're at a time of austerity, so all that's being cut.
I thought in a civilised society, you looked after the most vulnerable people. That was just what I thought a civilised society is, isn't it? Isn't that what a civilised society is? And that's exactly the same thing that the punk rock thing was striving for, a civilised and fair society. We've just seen in the recent election maybe a bit of the youth not following the script that they're meant to, and the Conservative Party actually actively said, we don't want to focus any advertising on them. Let the grown-ups sort it out, not the children. And they're the biggest shock of their lives, because kids still do care. I think punk rock, it was of its time and a thing, but it's just youth rebellion. It's just the way it should be. All that was forged in that white hot heat of teenage rebellion, of people being dissatisfied with their local and national situation. And if we ever needed another punk rock, I think it's right now.
Everybody's telling me what to do. After all, I thought you knew. I hate them and they hate you. This is what you've got to do. You gotta stand up for what you think is right. Don't take any more shit up those throats. You gotta stand up for what you think is right. And then you'll have some fun. Tonight. Alright. You go and form a band, try to get a break. A hippie runs the scene, he's always on the take, always talking behind your back. You never find out till it's too late. You gotta stand up for what you think is right. Don't take any more shit up the stores. You gotta stand up for what you think is right. And then you'll have some fun tonight. All right. There's rough justice all around you. Always say you're gonna break away. Rough justice all around you. Time to spot the reals from fakes. You gotta stand up for what you think is right. Don't take any more shit up those floors. You gotta stand up for what you think is right.